So I'm sort of one of those glass half full kinds of persons. I mean, and I struggle with weight because I like the feeling of being full all the time. So I sort of approached this topic of the gift of emptiness with a wee bit of trepidation. It turns out that this was sort of a tough one for me, and maybe it will be for you as well. At one point in this chapter, in the Gifts of the Dark Wood, this list from Forest Church is presented. He wrote, "Let me be telling you a little bit about yourself. To one extent or another, the following is true. You are self-conscious about your appearance. You feel guilty about the things you've done or have failed to do. You sometimes have a hard time accepting yourself or forgiving others. You are a frustrated wife, husband, or partner, or you are frustrated not to be a wife, husband, or partner. You have secrets which you might betray or which might betray you at any moment. However successful you are, you fail in ways that matter both to you and to your loved ones. Beyond all this, your life is stressful, your happiness fleeting, your health insecure. You worry about aging. You sometimes worry about dying. More than once, your heart has been broken by betrayal or loss. And however successful you may be, however deep your faith, when the roof caves in, there are times you shake your fists at heaven, at the fates, or at life itself. And you beg for an answer to the question, why? Why this? Why me? Why now? The compelling thing about this list is how accurate it is. But more insightful still is how difficult it is to read when I change the word you to the word I. I'm self-conscious about my appearance, or however successful I am, I fail in ways that matter to both me and my loved ones. And you notice how I picked two fairly easy ones. Frank Forrester Church IV, who wrote those words, was the son of a senator and one of the most influential ministers of our time, author and editor of over 20 books, senior minister of the Unitarian Church of All Souls in New York City until late 2006, when he was appointed as Minister of Public Theology. Now there's a job. He graduated from Stanford and Harvard, and he was the father of 4. And you would think that a man of this brilliance, of this kind of success, would be exempt from insecurities and fears. But not one of us is exempt. Not even when we're walking straight down life's path. So imagine what it would be like to be free. Not free of our faults, but free of our fear of them. You see, the thing that separated Forest Church from the rest of the regular people in the world wasn't his overabundance of gifts, but his fearlessness about his shortcomings. I mean, few people really have the courage to face their inner emptiness the way he did. And that's what the Darkwood gift of emptiness brings us. Now, strangely enough, from outside the dark wood, perhaps this looks like a denial of self-worth and identity, but to those who are in the wood, it actually becomes a fulfillment of them. Because when we face those shortcomings head on, when we accept them, and then we let them go, then we can begin to access the awe-inspiring gifts and talents with which we have been blessed. And that's what Jesus meant when he said, those who try to make their lives secure, or those who preserve their lives, will lose them. But those who lose their lives will preserve them. In our day and age, we are scared of having nothing to do. We've grown to fear empty time. So picture this. It's Wednesday night. Now, at the Vail campus, it's small group night at Baggins. And I try to get there early to order my dinner. And sometimes I actually get there way before anyone else arrives. So what do you think I do? Well, more often than not, I pull out my cell phone and I check to see if anyone has emailed me since the 20 minutes have gone by since I checked it before I left the office. And I'll see maybe what my friends have posted recently on Facebook, and maybe I'll end up watching a brief video of cavorting little baby goats, or maybe the latest video of my adorable grandchildren. And that's how I might fill those empty minutes of waiting. But I have to say, in my defense, I am hardly unique. It seems that everybody is doing that. When Mark and I go to Disneyland, it always surprises us by how common it is for people standing in line to be staring at their cell phones as they slowly inch their way forward to the boarding area. And it seems that almost everybody did it. I mean, adults, seniors, kids, friends, siblings, even newlyweds. And some were absolutely engrossed in what they were viewing. Others actually carried on conversations with each other as they strolled and scrolled. Well, what about you? Are there parts of you that fear emptiness or empty moments? Luckily, we have Jesus showing us another way. Jesus showed us that emptiness is not something to be feared, but actually to be embraced as a gift from God. And we see that fully in action in our story of Jesus on the cross and how he fulfills his destiny there. And even in that moment when he senses emptiness, when he feels that God has forsaken him, he has enough reserve to draw on in order to face that empty feeling head on. And we see that principle in action when Jesus utters some confusing and challenging words. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it. And those who lose their life for my sake will find it. We've all heard those words. What does Jesus mean by them? And it occurs to me that Jesus lost his life long before he died on the cross. I think that Jesus lost or surrendered his life when he decided that he wasn't going to allow his life to be filled with concern about whether he was popular or comfortable or conventional. And he wasn't going to be consumed by desire for access or wealth or power. He emptied himself of those concerns. And as a result of that emptiness, Jesus was open to receiving the Spirit of God. And when he lost or surrendered worldly concerns, he saved or set aside his life to pursue God's will for the world. Those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Now, Eric Elnes, who wrote our book, calls this a move from fear to flow. Flow, he writes, is what happens when you stop obsessing over your need to be right or to be perfect or to survive and discover that you have been given unique gifts and abilities that bring you alive and even keep you alive. And these gifts are only accessible when we let go of our need for survival, rightness, and perfection. You see, we can't even see our gifts when our vision is clouded by fear or self-loathing or blame. So then Eric Elnes tells this wonderful story about a little frog that he spooked one day when he was walking in the woods. And those are the real woods, not the metaphorical ones. And he says that the frog hopped away and performed a series of acrobatics that would put Cirque du Soleil to shame. and over twigs and rocks and sticks, twisting and flipping. You could almost see the little guy shouting, "Yahoo!" as he disappeared into the brush. Well, leave it to a theologian to find a devotion in a frog. But what was it, do you think, that allowed the frog to escape so nimbly? Of course, fear comes to mind first, but think about it. Well, fear probably triggered the survival instinct to get away. Its escape was made possible by its natural, God-given abilities, its frogness. And the frog's acrobatic escape was probably 1/10 fear and 9/10 flow. And millions of years of evolution enabled that frog to do what it did naturally. And that's one thing I think that the animal world tends to have over humans. If the ratio of fear to flow had been reversed, that little froggy would have responded more like a human, cowering and crying, "Woe is me! I'm too small and too weak to take on this giant." And he had just shaken his little froggy fist at the heavens, the fates, or life itself, and said, "Why? Why this? Why me? Why now?" Now, of course, there are times when we have fear to stay safe and alert. But we also have God-given abilities to deal with whatever threats we may run into. But when we let fear take over in times of peril, then we may actually put ourselves at greater risk, even though we think we're being more careful. Like the guy entering the freeway who stops on the on-ramp. Chances are, unless you're operating on a much higher level than most of us here, you spend time focusing on and fearing your shortcomings, worrying about not measuring up, not having what it takes, not having all the tools you need in order to make things happen. And we think that if people knew who we really are, maybe they wouldn't like us or respect us anymore, if they even respected us in the first place. Maybe somebody that you knew confirmed your fears already sometime in your life by rejecting you and ideas that you put forward. Or maybe that happened in your child. Maybe it just happened this past week. If it was a natural thing, being able to empty yourself to worldly cares, to what others think about you, then everybody would do it. But our human nature fills us with worldly concerns. Losing our lives for the sake of Jesus just doesn't come naturally. Losing our lives for the sake of Jesus means letting go. And we stop clutching at things that have no eternal value. And when we elect to lose our lives, then we refuse to allow this or that petty matter to control us. And instead, we simply surrender our lives to God. Now, my guess is that God's gift of emptiness rarely just sort of, boom, occurs all at once. I think that we progressively learn to let go a little bit at a time. And I suppose this might be somewhat a silly example, but I'll give it anyway. I love to shop. In stores, online, at those parties where people invite you to their house and have goodies and all sorts of things for sale. You know, those little kiosks that show up at fairs, even farmers markets, things like that. I mean, when I find myself with some free time, I love to check out the latest fashions or gadgets or whatever. And so I have found myself with things that I rarely use, let alone that I absolutely love. So this year, a friend of mine posted her attention to follow a Nothing New in 2018 guideline. And I decided that I would jump on that bandwagon. So for almost 2 months, I have successfully managed to buy only necessities. But boy, is that a shock to my system. I mean, it's hard when you're used to looking at stuff to buy and things that you think you need and what's the next greatest thing out there. But what I've discovered is that I find myself prioritizing what's important, really learning to love that which I already have, and giving space in my life to some other things. I let go of that bit of filling my life with things that aren't really necessary. Well, I've mostly let go of that. I'm a work in progress. So I've been able to empty myself of the need to constantly shop that used to occupy some small measure of my life. And losing that trivial preoccupation has freed up a tiny space in my being. And now I have time to take that little opening in my soul and to repurpose it. It used to be preoccupied with one of my rather petty desires, and now I can surrender it to be used to seek God's will for my life. Some of us at some point may find ourselves in the dark woods of being consumed with the smothering preoccupations of daily life. So it might be your job, it might be illness or health issues, it could be caring for kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, it could be all of those things. And in that dark woods, the way forward may not be easily seen. But with God's help, we can take stock of where we are. We can examine our lives. We can see how well or how poorly we do at surrendering our lives to God's will, at losing our lives for Jesus' sake. And we may discover that God comes to us with a gift, the opportunity to empty our lives of preoccupation so that we can more fully embrace God's will. Each week,